I'm going to do it anyway, and we'll talk about it later. We've got something that's unfolding now.
There is a news conference going underway in Los Angeles. The brother of one of the pilots of the plane that slammed into the Pentagon is now talking to the press.
In Arlington National Cemetery, Chick was actively involved in the Leadership Endowment Project for the United States Naval Academy Foundation. He was an exemplary human being. He was a hero long before this happened, and he was a hero to our entire family. We'll take a few questions.
Being a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy, I mean, it shows just that alone. He was an extraordinary individual. Was he also extraordinarily patriotic? And what would he have thought about the action taken against all these civilians? Any idea?
I can tell you that my brother was a very patriotic American. His biography is a testament to that. His chief concern when this was going on, I can assure all of the passengers on his airplane and his, or the loved ones of those passengers and his crew members, his chief concern would have been their safety. He had impeccable judgment. That judgment was carefully honed as a naval officer flying on landing jets on carrier decks in the middle of the night. He was a very brave man. What would he have thought of, from a political point of view? I assure you that wouldn't have been going on in his mind. He would have been he was a very disciplined man who would have been working at the task at hand. And those people need to know that their captain was very, very brave. He was the quintessential example of courage under fire.
Brad, you spoke a little bit ago about your brother as being a hero. We're hearing bits and pieces now about what may have happened on board these flights. When you hear the narrative from the federal officials about what perhaps went down with the box cutters and overtaking the cockpits and the like, what are your thoughts? How do you think your brother may have held up in that circumstance?
I'm reluctant to speculate on what he would have done or what happened on board that flight. That's for the federal authorities to review and discover, although I know Chick would have done absolutely the right thing in the best interest for his fellow crew members and for every single passenger on that plane.
Had he ever spoken about the possibility of being hijacked?
Chick was always reassuring people that airplanes are one of the safest places you can be. I'm sure that he was aware that when he went to work that there was always a possibility of some kind of catastrophe. But for him, it was very, very remote. I don't think that when Chick went to work, he thought about hijacking. But that doesn't mean that he didn't conduct himself in the most impeccable fashion.
At one point, you were looking at the split-screen image of the damage caused by the plane hitting the Pentagon. Excuse me. And one of the points we need to make now is that White House spokesman Ari Fleischer confirmed earlier today that, in fact, the intended target of that plane was not the Pentagon, but perhaps the White House. And he also acknowledged that Air Force One was considered a target of this attack. Instead, this plane went down into the Pentagon. There are chilling accounts of how the plane made a 250-degree turn as it came into a very low angle over the land surrounding the Pentagon. Aaron?
Well, we have told you the Empire State Building is being evacuated. Penn Station is being evacuated. More lives are being disrupted tonight as they were yesterday. It seems in some moments, to be honest, that there isn't a New Yorker who hasn't had their lives disrupted by this tragedy, this atrocity that has taken place in this city. Every time we hear sirens, I'll confess, we're not so cold about this that we don't jump a little bit. You hear them, and it gets a little scary. And it is that kind of feeling, that fear and that anger that we have found consistently on the streets of our city. More on that to your CNN's Beth Nissen.
This is what New Yorkers woke up to this morning. Those who'd managed to sleep at all during a night of surreal quiet. No planes overhead, no car alarms, Strangely, no sirens. This morning, no traffic jams, no rush hour crowds, no 110-story buildings where 2 had stood yesterday. People rushed to buy up postcards, vibrant reminders of what New York City looked like on Monday.
I'm used to seeing the Twin Towers, and this morning they weren't there. It was sad. It was just, it's just horrible.
Yesterday, it was all so unreal, so distant. By today, it had hit home. So many people knew the name of someone who never called home yesterday, never came back from work. A neighbor, a friend, a brother-in-law.
This is what he looks like, and if anyone's seen anything, we'd appreciate them calling to try to help us out. The phone number is 718-432-5982, and anything that anyone can do to try to help us find him.
People who hadn't read a newspaper in months hunted down copies today, read every word, gasped at still photos that stopped the heart. It had happened. It had really happened. Slowly today, the state of stun, the disbelief, gave way. In some cases, to anger. In this city of fast moves and blunt words, there were many who wanted vengeance in a New York minute.
I've always been a bleeding heart liberal, but right now I certainly feel a lot of anger, and, you know, I mean, there's a side of me that wants to see our government just go and whoever's an enemy, just hit him now and ask questions later.
But as most people began to comprehend what had happened at the World Trade Center, what had to have happened to all those people, disbelief gave way to sorrow, to great aching sadness. So many people in this city of walkers walked with their heads low today, depressed, defeated somehow. The bad guys seem to have won this time. Americans don't have much experience with defeat. New Yorkers don't ever admit it. Hundreds lined up on the West Side Highway, the main access to the attack site, to offer their support, to rally their spirits. But on the day after, just one long day, millions of New Yorkers are already so weary. New Yorkers don't wait well, and they've had to wait for the phone calls saying, "I'm fine, she's okay," or "We haven't heard from him yet." They've had to wait for hard facts. How many saved? How many lost? Who did this? And why? And today they began to realize the waiting may last weeks, months, even years. The waiting for answers, for comfort, for peace of mind, for justice. For the first day they wake up and don't immediately think of this. Beth Nissen, CNN, New York.
And right now, it is time to check in with Tricia Stevens. You were one of the very lucky ones. You were working in 2 World Trade Center.
Yes.
Explain to us where you were when these attacks happened.
We were on the 98th floor of 2 World Trade Center. It was about a few minutes to 9. We were at our desks, and the person who sits behind me, thank God, Sandra, was the first to see the flames that were coming from the impact from 1 World Trade Center. And she screamed, "It's a bomb, let's get out of here." And that just sent us all running. We ran to the staircase. We ran down 20 flights of stairs from 98 to 78. And I was so lucky I got on the first elevator down. And it's the express elevator down to floor 1. When we got to floor 1, we had people telling us to just get out of there, get out of there. And as soon as we got to the door leading to the outside, we heard this noise. I call it the sound of destruction, because that's all you could really think that it was. And you just heard this massive sound. What I later learned was the plane crashing into the building, and debris falling, and people screaming. And
how did you stay alive?
When I came out, I lost the hand of the person I was with, Vivian, and I went running around, and I saw a van that was carrying flowers to the farmer's market, and I jumped in, and I waited there. I don't know how long it was. I was screaming and hysterical, but I realized that if anything happened, I was so close to the building that I had to get away. I jumped out and I ran across the street. There was a police officer there who grabbed my hand and helped me up to where the Brooks Brothers building was. And after that, I just kept running and walking and running.
And that was your instinct to run, and you found yourself actually on the Brooklyn Bridge then, many minutes later.
I ran into my co-worker, Helena, and together we just walked and walked to the Brooklyn Bridge. When we got to the other side, on the Brooklyn side, we both turned around and we saw our building that I was in shortly before just crumbled right before our eyes, and we couldn't believe it because we have two people from my job, Helene, Frank Neistat, and Barbara Gazzardo. They haven't found them yet, and they worked in our department.
And I think that's one of the most devastating parts of this tragedy, because so few people know where the thousands of folks are that were working in those towers. You actually emailed friends today to describe to them what went on. Did you do that for catharsis?
There were so many people calling me, and people in tears thinking that I was dead because they saw the building collapse. And it hurt me so much to hear them crying because they thought I wasn't there anymore. And it was the phones weren't working well, so it was the fastest way to let a lot of people know that I was okay and to let them know what happened. And that people got out. You know, some of us got out. And there's hope, you know.
One of the things you expressed in this email is your gratitude for that police officer as you were hiding behind that van that somehow had the instinct to tell you, you gotta get out of here, you gotta get out from under this van. Will you ever forget his face?
No. No, I won't forget his face. He ran towards me when I was running towards him, and there were so many people looking and watching, and he just like grabbed me, and you know, he gave me focus to get, you know, away, because otherwise there's so much going on around you, you're not really sure where to go, you know.
You have to feel so lucky as we're standing here tonight.
I'm blessed, and I'm guided by the hand of God, and for so many of us that got downstairs in time to get on that elevator, I truly believe that God has just taken us out of that building, because there's so many who did not make it, and we're truly blessed.
Before we let you go, any thoughts on the heroism that the hundreds of firefighters on duty exhibited, and the police officers, one of whom you said forever will have an impact on your life?
It's really sad, because while we were running away, they were running towards us. And nobody could have known that that was going to happen, that the building was going to collapse. And we pray for them, and we're so appreciative, because without them, we would not have known to just get out as quickly as we did. And I remember police officers saying, head north, get away, when people were standing, and they were just telling us to get away as quickly as possible. And they saved a lot of lives, and we're appreciative.
Well, you certainly represent the triumph of the spirit here in New York. We know this is extremely painful for you to share your story here this evening. We appreciate your coming by, Tricia, and best of luck. Aaron, as you and I both listened to Tricia, I guess the one thing that came to mind today is the amount of gratefulness that New Yorkers have expressed to the firefighters and the rescue workers on duty. At one point tonight, I am told that a couple hundred New Yorkers actually worked their way in within 2 blocks of Ground Zero to thank and cheer on the rescue workers on duty.
I was coming up from the scene down there at about 8 o'clock tonight, and we're coming through Tribeca. We drove by, we were behind a caravan of police and fire officials, and out from a bar or a tavern, I wasn't sure, it went by pretty quickly, a group of people had come out, because this is a street where there's been a tremendous amount of movement of rescue personnel, and they came out and they were holding little votive candles. and they just were holding them out towards the firefighters, the police officers, the assorted rescue workers from not just New York City, but all over the area, just to say thanks. They were